Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following. IU Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, working to improve cybersecurity and provide policy guidance through partnerships with industry, government, and academia.
Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Asian carp have only been found in creeks and streams in Indiana, but there's a real threat the invasive fish might make it into Lake Monroe.
I think silver carp could kill recreation on all those lakes.
Signs are posted around the lake, but what more can be done to keep the area's largest water supply safe from the invasive fish? Plus, the state's Department of Education didn't allocate funding properly to charter schools, and the feds are involved now. Ahead, our StateImpact education team explains what went wrong and how it's going to be fixed. And
we're pretty sure no one was murdered or anything down there, but you never know.
In our Hidden Places series, we go underground and take you to the Catacombs in Indianapolis. The dark passageways seem to go on forever. Why were they constructed, and what's being done now to preserve them? Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Season 3 of Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Asian carp are wreaking havoc on rivers across Indiana, most recently in Monroe County. The invasive species has been detected in Salt Creek, sparking fears that the fish will make their way into nearby Lake Monroe. The Department of Natural Resources is alerting fishermen to try and prevent that from happening. But as Barbara Brozier reports, if Asian carp do end up in Lake Monroe, there's not much the state can do to get rid of them.
When Brendan Kearns takes people out on the Wabash River, he has one word of advice: duck.
You could be having a peaceful moment on the river and all of a sudden you get smacked by a 12-pound fish upside the head.
Kearns is pretty good at getting this kind of Asian carp, called silver carp, to put on a show. The theory is they jump out of the water when they're bothered by unusual vibrations, like the motor on his boat.
What I'm doing now is I'm irritating them. I've got the motor up a little bit, and I'm making them more nervous than what they naturally are.
It can be easy to feel on edge while on the Wabash with Kearns. Fish are flying past or into your head, and occasionally one ends up in the boat. That's why he doesn't bring many people out here anymore.
I love taking people out on the river, but I have to be very careful. So we've had a couple situations where we've been on this boat running about 40 to 50 miles an hour, and a silver carp would jump and go right past your head.
Oh my God!
Several years ago, he captured this video of hundreds of carp jumping out of the Wabash at once. Now imagine this happening somewhere like Lake Monroe.
I think silver carp could kill recreation on all those lakes.
The Indiana Department of Natural Resources is worried about that possibility too. They recently discovered Asian carp in Salt Creek just below the Lake Monroe Dam, and it's not the first time.
We've had reports of Asian carp actually jumping, and anglers that have been fishing the tailwaters have actually sent us videos as early as 2010.
There hasn't been much success with containing Asian carp in Indiana's rivers, and scientists are still struggling to figure out the best way to do so. Other states have installed control mechanisms like electrical barriers to try and prevent the carp from spreading.
One of the areas of research in my lab is looking at trying to improve electrical barrier technologies because there are some issues with the current configuration in terms of fish potentially being able to get through and around that.
If the invasive species was to make its way into Lake Monroe, it could be there to stay. Asian carp reproduce rapidly, and because the reservoir serves as Bloomington's water supply, the solutions would be limited.
You can't drain the lake because it's the water supply for Bloomington, and just the sheer size of it. And the purpose of the reservoir is for flood control. So to try to fix a fisheries problem is a fairly low priority.
There is some good news. Asian carp haven't been detected in any of the state's reservoirs, and it would be hard for them to make their way into those large bodies of water on their own.
Right now, the dams seem to be keeping them out of reservoirs for the most part.
Goforth says the biggest threat actually comes from anglers. It's hard to distinguish young Asian carp from popular bait fish, so people could mistakenly introduce the species into lakes. A state law aims to reduce those chances by prohibiting the possession of live gizzard shad at many of Indiana's lakes.
Sometimes it's hard for experts to tell the difference when they're really small fish. And so the best thing to do is just not to do any kind of transfer of fish among water bodies ever.
Because Asian carp is still relatively new to the U.S., Goforth says it's not clear what impact the fish have on the rivers they take over. There are so many factors at play in a river ecosystem that it's hard to tell if deteriorating quality of plant life and other fish are directly caused by the presence of Asian carp.
There's no sort of silver bullet at this point saying, if the carp are here, this is what they will do. That's sort of a holy grail, I guess, at this point in trying to do research.
Back on the Wabash and Terre Haute, the fish haven't stopped Kearns from spending time on his beloved river. And he has his own ways of learning to cope with the carp.
What I like to do in areas like this, I like to get them to jump and they get stuck in the trees.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
Now you can actually eat the fish, but they're bony and don't have much meat, so they haven't become popular in the U.S. Now, for headlines, we go over to Lindsay Wright, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. An Indiana University student who was murdered this week had just transferred to campus this fall. 21-year-old Yalin Wang was killed at the Stratum Apartments, an off-campus student apartment complex. When police arrived Wednesday night, they say they found her dead from apparent stab wounds. They believe her boyfriend, Xuanlin Shao, killed her before hanging himself. Wang was a junior at IU. Shao was not a student. According to police, the two had been in a relationship for about 6 months and recently moved in with each other at the apartment. A panel of lawmakers and legislative appointees met for the first time Thursday to begin discussing redistricting reform. But as Brandon Smith reports, there seems to be fundamental disagreement between committee members on whether or not Indiana's system needs to be changed.
The committee spent the bulk of its first meeting hearing a review of Indiana's redistricting process and the systems in place in other states. But in the committee members' opening comments, a partisan divide soon surfaced. Republicans on the panel seem happy with Indiana's current system, while Democrats advocate for change. Senate Minority Leader Tim Lannon says that divide is concerning and acknowledges that many voters might look at the House and Senate GOP supermajorities and question whether Republicans have any motivation for reform.
I would hope that voters would be sending messages clearly to the supermajority members of the General Assembly that they expect change. And if they do not, that will be a consideration when it comes election time.
The members also spent time outlining their initial thoughts, and Buck Creek Senator Brant Hirschman, echoing his other Republican colleagues, says he's proud of the way GOP lawmakers have drawn the maps.
And I don't think that this is nearly the voodoo science that people suggest that it is, such that drawing a line on a map is going to ensure an outcome. One of the things I pointed out today is when parties have drawn the maps in the last 2 cycles, the opposite party immediately took control in short order.
But Democrats on the committee, and even Republican appointee Ted Boehm, a former state Supreme Court justice, criticized the lack of competitiveness in Indiana's races. They note that more than 40% of lawmakers in 2014 ran unopposed in the general election. The study committee runs for 2 years. Another meeting is expected in the next couple of months. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Brandon Smith.
A caucus will meet next week to choose a new House Majority Floor Leader. Republican Judd McMillan vacated the position and abruptly resigned from the legislature this week. The Brookville Republican was considered a rising star in the GOP caucus and was first elected in 2010. McMillan's resignation comes after sources say compromising videos of the lawmaker surfaced. Some of Indiana's toll road plazas are getting a major makeover. 8 of 10 plazas will be rebuilt and 2 will close permanently. The $34 million project calls for transforming 2 of the stops into smaller fueled convenience stores and rebuilding 2 other plazas to be larger. The changes come nearly a year after the Indiana Department of Transportation and a state lawmaker expressed concerns about the deteriorating conditions at many of the plazas. The project is slated to be completed in early 2018. Well, as people get older and maybe face health problems or other issues, they often have no place to turn if they don't have family. The aging baby boomer population has exacerbated the problem. There's a need for volunteers who can advocate for seniors and incapacitated adults. The legislature allocated funding to create a volunteer program. At a press conference Thursday, a group of Monroe County leaders announced they'd receive some of that state money to create a guardianship program.
As the boomers continue to age, and I'm one of those boomers, we will continue to need the services of those who are able to provide care for us, who are able to step in and deal with financial issues, and all of this under court supervision.
For each case, a local judge will appoint someone from a pool of volunteers to help with everything from finances, making healthcare decisions, and living arrangements. Monroe County's program is beginning the process of recruiting and training those volunteers. Communities and law enforcement agencies across Indiana are looking to the General Assembly for guidance on police body camera policies. At a study committee meeting this week, lawmakers heard testimony. The West Lafayette Police Force has been using body cameras for about a year now. The force used resources from the Department of Justice and the International Association of Chiefs of Police when developing a body cam policy. But they would like guidance from the legislature on privacy concerns and redacting video. Steuben County's sheriff told the panel he opposes cameras completely because he says their presence creates what he calls fear in our citizens. The study committee could have a recommendation in the coming weeks for a body camera policy the General Assembly can debate next session. Scientists are mulling over all the possibilities after NASA confirmed this week the existence of flowing liquid saltwater on Mars. Joseph DiBenedetto reports.
For years, researchers have speculated that liquid water likely existed on Mars. It was about 5 years ago when they discovered frozen water was present at Mars' poles.
We saw these dark lines on these steep slopes in a dozen different places on Mars, and they called them recurring slope lineae. And they were seasonal, and they would come up in the summertime, and it looked like water wetting the soil and flowing down the sides of these slopes.
The possibilities now? Greg McCulley says they could be endless, even maybe having humans move to Mars one day.
Certainly, I think that putting a habitat on Mars is very doable. I mean, I believe we have the technology to do that now. It's the travel, it's the mission to the planet and back that makes it so hazardous because of the length of time involved.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Joe DiBenedetto.
For the 6th straight year, Habitat for Humanity is leading volunteers as they build a house for a Bloomington resident in need. As Harrison Wagner reports, the goal is to complete the entire construction project in just 10 days.
Born in Coahuila, Mexico, Narita Garza moved to Bloomington at age 17. She's a single mother of 3. At times, she's had to work up to 3 jobs just to get by. Homeownership seemed out of the question. She and her kids always lived with family.
We have never had our own house or an apartment. And right now, me and my kids share a bedroom. It's me plus 3 of them, so it's pretty crowded.
Garza will receive the keys to her new home before the football game Saturday when IU takes on Ohio State. On Sunday, the house will be moved to its final location where subcontractors will set up plumbing, electricity, and other essentials. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Harrison Wagner.
And after Habitat hands over those keys, Indiana University will kick off against the #1 ranked team in the country. Football coach Kevin Wilson says his team will have to play better if they're going to defeat the Ohio State Buckeyes. Barbara Brozier reports.
The Hoosiers are riding a winning streak, the first time they've been 4-0 in 25 years. But Coach Kevin Wilson says they have their work cut out for them as they face Ohio State.
Very, very good team in all areas. #1 in the nation, longest win streak in the country. Those aren't flukes.
Wilson says he's happy to be playing such a tough opponent on home turf. The Hoosiers have spent the week trying to build on their momentum from their previous wins.
We're not playing our best, but yet we're still seeing a lot of good things. So it's kind of, when you're playing bad, you can say you can always get better. Well, we're playing pretty good in spots, and if we could just kind of keep sinking and working and getting it together.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
And Joe, tomorrow's game is sold out, so fans are encouraged to get to Memorial Stadium early. Kickoff is at 3:30.
And that sold-out crowd could mean the fourth largest crowd in IU football history. Lots of people, as you said, IU Athletics, NDOT saying get there early. NDOT is actually working on State Road 37 with the stoplights, keeping traffic moving, removing barriers. And if you don't have a ticket, something to keep in mind too, you might want to stay away from that area.
Hopefully it's a good game.
Thanks, Lindsay. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Thousands of people likely walk through this area or come here for lunch every day, unaware of what's below them. Ahead in our Hidden Places series, we venture underground to explore what's underneath Indianapolis City Market. A national sailing competition comes to Indiana. Ahead, we explain why Indiana is an ideal state to play host this time of year and how conditions do afford locals a bit of a home court advantage. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
We are a nation of explorers. We seek new ways of living, of thinking, and of expressing ourselves. We take risks, we learn from experience, and we keep moving forward. That's why we encourage and celebrate the explorer in all of us.
$10,000.
15? 15, you think?
20, 21,000?
600.
20. 18.5.
24.
It's at least 40.
Look at it.
4,500,000.
650.
20.
650.
This textile would be worth about $500,000.
$500,000?
No way.
I knew it. It's just a blanket.
Laying on the back of a chair. Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure. Congratulations.
I can't believe this.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. The Federal Department of Education says Indiana calculated a crucial aspect of local school funding incorrectly. This comes in response to inquiries from several members of Indiana's educational community who challenged the state on its practices after discovering inequalities between charters and traditional public schools. Rachel Morello from our StateImpact Indiana reporting team shares the details.
A number of Indiana charter schools lost Title I funding this year. That's money specifically set aside to help low-income kids. Some charter leaders cried foul. Why did they lose funds while neighboring public schools saw increases? In addition, many said their awards had shrunk below levels allowed by federal statute. According to a provision called Hold Harmless, no school or local education agency can lose more than 15% of the previous year's allocation. When asked to explain how the money had been divvied up, State Department of Education officials said the Hold Harmless statute doesn't apply to public charter schools. But according to the feds, it does. Check out this correspondence between federal and state officials. The statute and regulations make no distinction between regular local education agencies and charter school local education agencies. As a result, the Indiana Department of Education circumvented the protection provided by the Hold Harmless provisions and its regulations for charter school local education agencies. The feds determined that Indiana's DOE had shortchanged nearly half of the state's charter schools. In contrast, the same thing happened to fewer than 1% of traditional public schools. Federal officials told Indiana's DOE they will likely need to take corrective action to fix this year's award amounts. The two departments are working to figure out exactly what that might entail.
The state is working to send the U.S. Department of Education data on how Title I funds have been allocated dating back to 2010. This week in our Hidden Places series, we go to Indianapolis, and with Halloween on a lot of people's minds, the exploration of this hidden place certainly seems fitting. Catacombs are large underground systems traditionally used to bury the dead. They're most commonly found in Paris or Rome, where millions of people are buried. But these elaborate underground systems can be found around the world. My colleague Sarah Whitmire joins us now for the latest in our Hidden Places series. Sarah, catacombs here in Indiana?
Hard to believe, right, Joe? But yes, thousands of people visit Indianapolis's city market each day. But I wonder how many know exactly what is below their feet.
Monday through Friday, around noon especially, the city market is a popular gathering place. People take their lunch breaks and walk here for a slice of pizza or a sandwich. Some sit outside if it's nice and eat at one of the tables.
Hundreds of thousands of people have sat on this plaza, listened to live music, maybe enjoyed some lunch and some great conversation, and have never known what's sitting below them.
The entrance to the catacombs is hidden from public view, and there's no outside entrance. You go in through these doors, and eventually a set of stairs leads down to the basement. Quickly, the concrete floors are replaced by dirt. More than 140 columns create an underground maze.
This is unbelievable. It just keeps going.
This space is actually the basement of Tomlinson Hall, a 4-story multi-use building constructed in the 1880s.
For sporting events, it was like kind of having your convention center with Lucas Oil, with the Field House, with Circle Center Theater. Everything went on.
It was a heavy building constructed out of brick and Indiana limestone.
And this is the reason why there's so many columns. Is what that does is it brings all the weight down from the building and it distributes it throughout all these columns.
The curved ceilings are called barrel vault ceilings, and they help distribute the building's weight to the columns. As you walk further into the tangle of columns, you can't help but think about Indiana Jones. The catacombs he explored were beneath the streets in Venice.
What's this one?
But here in the catacombs, you won't find tombs or skulls.
From my experiences, yes, this is not what they're quite like in Europe.
Besides a stray chair, you won't find much at all.
For the most part, it was used for storage. They've just been always referenced to as the catacombs, which, it just is the subterranean level or the basement of what was once Tomlinson Hall.
So the catacombs are essentially just that, a basement. At least once, they were open to the homeless who were seeking shelter during a particularly cold winter in the early 1900s. And at one point, they were also used as a staging area for people to get food and clothing after a devastating flood in 1913.
But no dead bodies that we've found so far.
The catacombs are dark, it's damp, and it smells musty. Lake jokes about not finding any dead bodies in the catacombs, but that hasn't stopped paranormal investigators from wanting to visit the site to go ghost hunting.
I just want to try to talk in a way that we might be able to hear your voice. If the answer is yes, turn on one of those lights for us. Thank you. Thanks for turning that on.
So you haven't moved the chair since?
If we do have to move them for an event, they come right back. I'm not messing.
You don't touch the chairs. Yeah.
Multiple ghost hunters have stayed overnight in the catacombs, and their conclusion is there's nothing bad or evil in the catacombs, and it's, generally speaking, a calm place.
So I believe in nothing, ever, nothing. But I've seen enough and heard enough down here that I'm like, there might be something to this. I took a picture of a tour group down here one time. They're like, hey, Stevie, take a picture of us. I'm like, yeah, all right, grab the camera. The minute I clicked, I don't know what it was. I have no idea what it was. It was this white thing that came up straight up. And I caught it in the frame, and I'm like, you guys. Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
Tomlinson Hall burnt down in 1958. Why the catacombs weren't just filled in after the fire is a mystery.
A lot of times when there is a building that's being torn down, it has a lower level, they'll just infill with the materials on top. They didn't in this case. Maybe one of the reasons is because of the way it was built. It was built so structurally sound that maybe it cost more to, demolish and get into that basement area. So I guess we're lucky that they did leave a space like this.
and Stays is organizing an event in the Catacombs on Halloween. You know, the City Market opened the Catacombs up for tours during the Super Bowl. They'd been closed off prior to that. The tours were so popular, though, that they continued offering them every other Saturday during the summer months. They do some other events in the Catacombs, too, some movie nights. Think Fight Club and, of course, Indiana Jones. They also host a Prohibition party in December. But to get the Catacombs up to code would cost millions of dollars. So at least for now, any development plans for the Catacombs, Stays says, are on the back burner. Joe.
All right. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
And certainly if you're a sailor, you know the winds in Indiana this time of year are great. So much so that Lake Lemon in Monroe and Brown counties plays host to a national sailing regatta. 29 racers from across the country participated in this year's 55th annual regatta. The winds registered around 10 knots with gusts at about 15, ideal for the competition. The regatta wouldn't work here in July or August because there wouldn't be enough wind. But organizers talk about what they call the wind engine. They say it turns on at about the beginning of September. And I wonder if there was some kind of home court advantage there for the local sailors.
I think so. If you look at the list of winners, there are some Hoosiers among them. So I think it worked from there.
It's kind of like golf. You have to know the course, right?
Yeah, you have to understand the winds.
That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following. IU Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, working to improve cybersecurity and provide policy guidance through partnerships with industry, government, and academia.
Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.